Good afternoon. We have come to the last session, which is safety dialogue. And the topic is a role of technologies in augmenting driving skills to match emerging next gen vehicles. I think from the morning we were listening to different people from from the entire automotive related ecosystem. We started with the keynote where he addressed about the issues in India compared with the other countries like Japan, Singapore. Then Mr. Ramashankar Pandey, set the tone from the context of reducing the accidents. Then we had Dr. Baluja giving you an overall picture about how to manage the traffic. And the panel discussion started from the OEMs to the EOEMs, supplier, and the testing agency. And we witnessed the presentation from the aftermarket side, from the OE side again, and on the roadside assistance. So fireside chat gave us an overall picture of about how a supplier can support the entire ecosystem. So the only element left, of course, though that was mentioned by most of the speakers earlier, was the human touch. So OEMs can give a lot of new technologies supported by the tier ones and tier twos, but ultimately the onus is with the rider or the driver for the to reduce the fatalities or probably the prevent accidents. So I have two elite gentlemen, one representing the two-wheeler, which is the most vulnerable because of obvious reasons. Mr. Vinay Dhingra, Senior Director, IT Corporate Affairs, Honda Motorcycle and Scooter India, and Mr. Sohanjeet Randhawa, Director Sustainability of Volvo. Both companies have worked on safety, transportation, sustainable transportation, etc., for decades. And both of them have decades of experience on managing, mitigating these things. So let us learn from them on how to manage the last element of the ecosystem that I talked about, which is rider or the driver. So let me start by asking Mr. Dhingra on what are the challenges that are emerging with the new technologies coming into the vehicles for the average rider? The same question for you from the perspective of driver.
So thank you, Mr. Murali, for asking this question. And since morning I'm having a pressure of two-wheelers. I'm from two-wheeler industry and two-wheelers being most vulnerable. So what we have been doing, I'll be sharing that later. But first, let me explain, that what exactly the road safety driving skill we are talking about. Now, unfortunately, in India, before giving a driving license, there is no structured training available in India currently. When a person gets a learning license, absolutely he can apply online, get a license, start riding, taking a dangerous machine out on the roads, risking lives of others. Absolutely no training available at all. All the government of India is trying to bring some training concepts, but that is for the licensing. Just before getting a permanent license, the training will be available. We also have open centers for giving training in those kind of centers. And let me share, we have the first two-wheeler training center in India with the IDTR kind of concept, where training is being given. But what about the current license holders? People who already have a license, who were given a license without proper training. Maybe how to make training compulsory for them. That is one topic we are talking with the government of India. So all of us who have a license currently can go for a structured training. Now, believe me, after getting the training, you actually find a difference that when you drive a vehicle without training and with training, it makes a big difference actually. So one is the training system, what we are talking about. We have simulators wherein a lot of scenarios are there built into simulator, which you find, which you can actually try during training, what to do, what not to do, which makes you a better driver before you actually take vehicle on the road. The second problem or challenge, what we have seen, after you get a license, you start driving a vehicle, people don't maintain those vehicles. We have been talking about the brakes and lights and everything, and the periodic maintenance, which plays a very, very important role. Now, how to change the mindset for the vehicle maintenance? That is one of the challenges what we are facing currently. Technology is going to help, definitely will help. But India, what we have been listening since morning, the biggest challenge is basic mindset. We call it Kali Billi, luck or whatever,
Absolutely.
People, a basic mindset first needs to get change in India before technology, Maybe technology is when the human limit comes. Human cannot control more, we need help of technology. But India, the basics have to be set right first. All the luxury vehicles with new technology actually make people more overconfident. Now I have one more, one Kali Billi, one luck, now maybe a DAS also, So I can just drive with my mobile on, with my eyes closed and so on. So what we have been discussing currently is based on the Honda being a global company. Now Honda started giving trainings, road safety training in 1970s in Japan, and currently giving training in 43 different countries. So what we are trying to see, as we are all discussed in morning, that maybe Japan is number one, number two in road safety. So how they have done, we are trying to follow exactly Japan model. Maybe we have to change the mindset first of the Indian generation itself. DNA has to be changed.
Yeah.
And Honda has a vision that by 2050 we have to bring road fatalities to zero globally on the Honda vehicles, and to 50% by 2030. But Honda vehicle riders cannot be safe if roads are not safe. So we have to work on the entire country. In fact, now a lot of themes have been taken up. We give the training to all the new customers who buy Honda vehicles. We have simulator in all the dealerships across India. They're going through trainings. We give training to our employees. We have traffic training parks or SDECs, IDTR across India, giving training. But what finally we realize, India being a big country, 1.4 billion, with the kind of culture we are talking about, the DNA or mindset, we have to change maybe the way what we are doing for training. Maybe this generation mindset change is very difficult. So what we have been able to understand and doing currently is we have started focusing on the kids. Means the kids who will start driving vehicle after 7 or 8 years, which we have on target 2030, 50%. So class 5 and class 6 students, we are trying to change their mindset now. They're not only two-wheelers, but we all use roads as pedestrians also. Right. And many a time pedestrian is at fault, suddenly jumping in because maybe infra is not available. Infrastructure also is a problem in India. So two-wheeler being the number one population in terms of vehicles, second is pedestrian. So we have followed now a new concept of changing the mindset, not the direct way of telling what safety has to be done, but slightly nudging them towards road safety. So we have 4 factories in India. We are inviting one school every week to our factories, showing them how the vehicles are made, showing them what kind of career, health and hygiene they can have, and then telling road safety. Now what we all know is that one is a discipline. Just sharing the lane discipline we are talking about leads to many problems, not only life being taken, but the efficiency of the vehicle goes down, the fuel efficiency. Yeah. We lose more time. We start becoming more impatient. We're starting having health disorders because of, maybe traffic conditions. And if people start following road safety, maybe a lot of benefits can be there again. 15 to 20% fuel efficiency goes up. So our focus currently is on changing mindset, which is the biggest challenge, and moving in that direction. But again, being a very big country, we can't invite all the schools to our factories. So we created some videos now, short stories, maybe not a direct message, but indirect message for different age groups. Talking to government, talking to around government feel, what kind of country they want to have. They can become superheroes to save lives, can become better human beings. We've taken a slightly different route. Like countries like Japan and all have a very strong moral values from childhood. India doesn't have right now. We don't have curriculum in schools, what we discussed. So we're trying that way now. This is one of the ways, big challenge what we have and trying to solve.
Thank you, Mr. Dhingra. Mr. Sohanjeet.
Yeah. So let me start by going a little back. So let me trace the day a little back, the way you did it, but it's important to put things in perspective. I think it's important to remember that what Mr. Rohit Baluja also mentioned about the system approach before we bring the human aspect and drivers into place. Because if you look at the a Vision Zero future, which we all are part of, to make sure that there's no fatalities because of our vehicles on the road. One of the key aspects is to take a full system approach where individual behavior is being shifting to system approach, where you don't focus on the individual behavior, but you look at the entire system and how it operates and influences the individual behavior. So where it goes from individual motors, it's moving towards taking shared mobility or public transport as far as the city is concerned, for instance, as another basic concept. And from moving towards regulations to getting more cooperative and collaborative in real terms, not just a company like ours supporting the government in sponsorships, but getting involved deeply into their work. So this is the world which will, in our view, would take us towards making zero fatalities going up into the future, where the human is a fragile center of it all, not only from the body, biology, but also from the mind perspective. So giving him the job to fix everything may be a very big job. Now, coming down to the human aspect when it comes to drivers, and now, of course, I'm in the commercial vehicles from that industry perspective. So when we came to India in the very beginning, when we tried to sell our trucks, it was a different animal altogether from the existing trucks at that particular time. So driver became extremely important for us because his dealing with our vehicle, which will typically carry high value items, was critical for the overall performance of the vehicle. So the driver training became very important. But then the insight which we got was that ideas don't change ideas. It is circumstances which change ideas. So you can't just keep telling the driver that you have to be disciplined or you have to do this or you have to be waking up, you don't have to drink. That probably is something his parents have been telling him forever. Okay. So the thing was to figure out the circumstances which, if changed, would make them better. So I think the entire story on the driver was on that front, where we were lucky to one extent that when we gave Volvo as a product which he has to sell, and we made it mandatory that every vehicle should have 2 drivers or 4 drivers trained, otherwise the aftermarket support was not viable for the customer. And the customer was equally happy because he was investing a lot of money. The first thing the driver felt was that he has now a different life. First of all, because his cabin was high, so for the policeman to go and slap him was in those days were a very, very common thing, would be a much tougher thing for any policeman to do that. Next, his cabin itself gave him a status which made him want to do things differently. Suddenly, he was thinking differently. In fact, in one of the interviews I recall in the earlier days, when we asked him that you're now driving this vehicle, which is different, and I'm not trying to boast, I'm just getting to the fundamental circumstances. How do you feel? He said, "Pehle meri zindagi chalti thi, katti thi, abhi meri zindagi chal rahi hai." So his whole mindset changed from being fatalistic to being a little more positive about his future, which meant that he became more conducive to suggestions on what is happening. But this was not the end of it all. The driver alone, we found, was not the only guy involved in the entire value chain of safety. A lot of drivers are on the command of their operators. So if you have 2 operators, one operator prioritizes speed. And luckily, we don't have that kind of segment. But their operators will say, you need to take more passengers, you need to reach that place fast. If that is the command, then the driver has no choice but to move fast. If the operator happens to have a very poor condition where he expects to change drivers leaving every 2 months, like a sand operations, there the loyalty, the ownership of that job is very low. So, but if you have an operator who has a long distance movement, if you have an operator who has a steady policy, he treats his drivers better, the chances that the driver will take greater ownership is high. And if the operator prioritizes safety, fuel efficiency, and secure delivery, the chances the driver will follow that will happen. So it is not only the driver who is the cause of whatever we are talking about. It is the entire value chain. So for instance, even in a company, if you are asking for taxis to be deployed for your company. How much of us are trying to tell the people that the drivers of this vehicle should be of this kind? They should be told that the company expects X, Y, Z. Seat belt has to be worn. Speed has to be done. It has a major influence. So actually nowadays there's discussion, just like every company will have to declare their carbon footprint across the supply chain, right to the scope 3, to put a safety footprint. So what is your safety footprint of your own company, of your own employees driving? What's the safety footprint of your suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3? The fact that you can, if every company can influence the supply chain, we'll have about a very large share of traffic on the road influenced in terms of good driving practices. So this is the shift, I think, is very key to realize that there are circumstances under which, if you recall 20 years back, people in the transport industry will remember that some drivers in some applications were not even paid their salary once upon a time. They were supposed to steal the fuel. So imagine the people we are talking about to change their behavior are coming from that world till now. And if you had that driving environment, including Naxalite regions, robberies, all kind of problems, if any one of us were driving that kind of vehicle, we wouldn't be talking about good driving practices today. But those guys, especially in the long haul, were far more responsible than a typical human being in that condition. So if you get that empathy, you'll realize that it's not about him alone. It's his circumstances we have to change. So now going forward, there's a lot of things happening on technology to assist him, but maybe I can take that in the next step.
Mr. Dhingra, I would like to ask you about. Hello? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. You talked about the culture, the mindset change, etc., and then you're imparting, training, education to school children. While most of the accidents happen on the rural areas, because like Deepak Jain said, in cities and metros, wherever the road traffic, the average speed is very less, and then there's less possibilities for accidents and fatalities. How do you plan your training program? Because when it comes to the sales of two-wheelers, only the urban centers have more. But whereas the risk is on the rural side, how do you mitigate it?
See, one is the urban, the most important point what we have been discussing since morning, that accident happens maybe on the highways where the speed is more, one. Secondly, also in cities where pedestrians are more. So we are focusing on training on the schools, not only on the urban area, but the rural areas also. Maybe those kids, someone will maybe become future driver also. What is this? Secondly, we have got a big fleet of logistic trucks and also the transporter supply chain trucks. Now, these trucks travel pan-India. And many a time, what we have seen, one of the biggest percentage of accidents is back hit accidents, mostly because of trucks. 28% accidents in India are back hit accidents. Now, these reason being that trucks, the tail lamps are not maintained. Very simple thing, reflective tapes are not maintained, not cleaned. So one is our own fleet. One, that we are training them also when they drive pan-India. They have to be responsible drivers. They have to maintain their trucks. And every truck entering our factory, we have to check. We will not allow a truck without having these kind of facilities or they're not maintained. Secondly, we have taken one different initiative to take care of the highway accidents because of trucks. We're talking to petrol pumps in India and dhabas in India, When a truck stops at a petrol pump or dhaba, please clean their reflective tapes. Please have maybe a small workshop where tail lamps can be changed. We're talking to Ministry of Petroleum to get involved with us and use all the petrol pumps in India, across the India. So that segment will be taking care like that. Also, very soon we're going to start the training camps, safety training camps in rural areas also, where people cross roads on highways, Although they're not driving vehicles, but they're using road as a pedestrian. So that will be a next step. Maybe from next year onwards, we'll be focusing on that segment also, so that overall accident rate can go down.
Yeah, that's interesting to know. I think working with fuel stations to clean up the tail lamps and other things, that will certainly help. The visibility is more important here. Mr. Randhawa, I will come back to you again. You said the entire value chain needs to be energized. But from the OEM point of view, Volvo, I think, has started the driver training even before the production started. But how do you, as an OEM, energize the entire value chain?
And our value chain as a supplier is included in that. I think the way out is to put a demand, and it's going to be very tough. Already climate change demands are tough because the transition to being green across the supply chain needs immense energy. You have to go and sit with each of the key suppliers, like Breaks India was there, and you have to find innovative or current methods to do it. If safety is given that same priority, because safety has gone into the back burner, climate change is, of course, rightfully taken the top priority, but at the cost of safety, maybe. I think we have to, if there's a requirement that we need to calculate a footprint, then we need to sit our suppliers and talk about it. And in the beginning, it may be very tough because you may be the one of the few people talking, but actually I suspect most companies are, like you just mentioned, that they're talking to suppliers and not letting certain things. More and more people will talk, the standards will automatically rise. Just the way it's happening in climate change. The beginning, when we talked to suppliers, it was just few people and everybody thought it's a cost. But now the whole world is talking. Maybe Mr. Gadkari notices this, he put some kind of a regulation. So things conspire to typically come together and make an impact on that front. And the demand, of course, from the customer or the final customer makes a huge difference. So like if the final customer is ready to pay a bigger ticket price, a certain bus will sell. If not, it will not.
But from the driver's point of view, so you mentioned that now the value chain where the driver is part of it.
Yeah.
How do you support that value chain so that now the driver's fatigue or driver's productivity can be improved?
Yeah, the driver productivity is a mix of many things. First of all, of course, the operator himself. He has to set up, maybe we can put a demand on him. The other part of his productivity can come through many, many new methods. One is, of course, our training programs, which we have, and we don't do one training program. We normally have a training program followed by a refresher program, followed by a fleet manager program. So the driver and the fleet operator are coming together. Then we have this new methods which are called the driver coaching systems. So which means when the driver is driving, the entire driving pattern is evaluated off on the fly by a coaching system where he keeps getting feedback on how he's driving in terms of braking, in terms of wrong curves, in terms of speeding. And that becomes a feedback mechanism where he starts trying to adjust himself to that methodology in terms of productivity. Of course, information is key for the driver, for him to understand what's going on. And we do help them to analyze the entire scenario. So if you have typical accidents, you realize that when the rain start is a critical moment. When the early morning fatigue takes place is a critical moment. And from that point of view, you kind of make sure you advise people. When you have visibility issues is a very critical moment also in terms of vehicle on the road, etc. Here I'm not talking about it, but there are huge amount of technologies involved where you can actually help the driver see beyond what he can visibly see today. And you can also provide him the things mentioned earlier in the day, drowsiness control, etc., lane assist, emergency braking, everything, which comes into the gamut of technologies which are already kind of available for him to be safer on the front. But I think the best way is to engage him in this whole thing and advise him and advise the entire fleet, not only him. This awareness level and this interventions in the right point is key. Because, for instance, when we are talking about children education, for instance, it is good to show people the problem before telling them the feature. For instance, in the morning we were talking about cars. We were talking about need to educate people before about airbags, about the child seat, about the there was some other lane assist, ABS, and ADAS. The important thing is not those features. Actually, they're important. The important thing is to tell them what are the 5 typical accidents which take place. And important thing is to show them the weight of the child's head. The important thing is for them to show that vehicles which are crashing into vulnerable users because, number one, they can't see the person, or that person can't see the vehicle. So this allows appreciation of the feature. So when we actually did a similar program like you have done, and actually you would have done far more than we are small, but our program was based upon a fundamental fact that a majority of the vulnerable users accident takes place because they can't see or they cannot be seen. It's a very fundamental thing. And do you realize that from your childhood, you have been given one mantra which has still stood by you in terms of safety, which is look left, look right, look left, or I don't know which one it is, and then cross. It's a very simple mantra which we take for granted, but it has really, really helped save many children's lives. So what we did is we moved it just one step forward. You look left, you look right, you look left again, and then you look into the eyes of the person who stopped for you and wave as a child. And only when you see that you are acknowledged can you go. So then the training program suddenly serves a purpose, which is that you are making things transparent. Because if you know that, at least in commercial vehicles, in two-wheelers and four-wheelers, I don't know, visibility is number one issue in safety.
Visibility is, it's a key aspect. Mr. Dhingra, the threat on the road is beyond visual range. On the one side, that is bothering the riders. On the other side, the performance of the vehicle is increasing. Like, for example, 0 to 100 in about 5 seconds, 4 seconds. That kind of not in two-wheelers, but generally, the speeds are increasing. So what kind of solution that you think that you can impart to the newer generation riders to mitigate these things beyond visual range?
See, two-wheelers definitely, don't have this kind of problem. 0 to 100 kind of speed in going very fast. But most of the cities, we have speed limits. So speed limits have been defined based on, what is safe in that area. A vehicle can go 0 to 100 in 5 seconds or 250, but you are not supposed to drive at high speed in those areas. But people don't follow rules, right? And one of the very basic fundamental issues is the enforcement. And enforcement also has a limitation. You can't have cameras at every 50 meters. And unfortunately, because of digitization has become so smart, there are apps available who will tell you there is a camera, slow down. And after camera, again, maybe you can speed up. So what we finally realize is ultimately it is mindset. You are on the city road, you are on highway, you are driving whichever vehicle. India, being a very big country, infrastructure problems are available. Most of the highways are available taking the rural lands, They still use those roads as a city road. For us, it is a highway. For them, it is a city. Now, how to take care of that? What we have understood finally, it is mindset has to be taken care of first before we straight away jump to technology. So technology should not become negative for us because our basics itself are not okay. So whatever kind of vehicle you are in, the very fundamental point is have basic road discipline. You have seen a lot of people on two-wheelers specifically I'm talking about, they start taking wrong way, not taking a bigger U-turn because most of them are the mass commuters. For them, maybe saving 2 rupee petrol also is very, very important. So they will risk their life or somebody else's life and take maybe a wrong side again, or maybe try to jump the footpath. Many a time we have seen the delivery companies, Rapido, Swiggy, with time pressures. Ultimately, it is mindset one. we were in fact discussing, can we request government to have speed limiters? You know, you can't drive your vehicle beyond the speed limit. Maybe certain countries have this kind of facility available, and maybe it is on choice. You still have voluntary control on that kind of feature. Maybe India needs maybe that kind of hard control. You know, you whatever vehicle you have, maybe you can afford paying challan, you should not be able to drive that vehicle. Maybe currently till India changes mind, generational DNA change, maybe these kind of hard techs are required. That's my personal feeling. You know, maybe India needs that kind of control currently. So most of us in this generation have been born with this kind of India only. We have not seen what the other world actually is. So when we invite children to ask factories, we are showing them videos. This is what Japan is, Sweden is. You know, what kind of country you want to have in future. We are good in IT, good in medical, space also maybe now. You know, but roads still remain very, very low tech, very, very backward. Maybe the sensitivity of the people, maybe including us, maybe as parents, as whatever level, the first is mindset. That's my feeling. Technology will come next for India.
That's interesting. I think HMSI has introduced the combi brake, in Activa. That has actually helped a lot of riders while mitigating curves, especially during wet road conditions. Those are technologies from the hardware point of view. There are new technologies coming from the software side and electronics, like the ADAS equivalent of two-wheelers, that is advanced rider assist systems. Do you see these new technologies can help avoid accidents and fatalities eventually?
See, new technologies like ADAS and all definitely will help, but again, the affordability becomes a problem. We have in our premium bikes, but the majority of the accident what we see in India currently very less on premium bikes. Those drivers are very well trained. They have best of the features available. For low cost segment motorcycle, affordable technology currently I think is far off. It will help in case we can afford, and but definitely certainly right now maybe difficult to afford in this kind of segment. Technology will help definitely. Or Government of India makes a regulation for all, a fair play for all. The companies have to invest money, customer has to maybe buy those kind of bikes. But in the India currently, based on the overall economy level, affordability will become problem with that kind of tech.
It's too early to say in two-wheeler segment, but for commercial vehicles, especially buses and trucks, there are a lot of technologies like, for example, E-Horizon, where you predict what and using the latest 4G, 4D imaging technology, fourth dimension, to assess what's happening beyond the visual range. While on the one side, these technologies really support the drivers in taking the corrective action. On the other side, as we hear from Deepak Jain, on the cybersecurity risk. So while we depend heavily on these technologies, the software, the gadgets, etc., what happens if it is corrupted through cyber threats? Mm-hmm. How do you, Volvo is one of the proponents of safety. How do you really, educate the drivers of these modern technologies and also manage them?
I think actually just this Sunday and Saturday we were in the Indian Mobile Congress, where we displayed along with the Rixon future vision of the same 4D display, where the driver can see beyond what he can see. So basically, if there's a vehicle in front of him, he can see beyond it. He can see things coming out and all. But that was the visualization. Now, all these technologies are connected to 5G, etc., are prone to cybersecurity. That's one issue. The other biggest area of focus is cognitive load, because there is a lot of information potentially in the future, and how much of that load is good for the driver, how much can he take. And there's a lot of study going into that area where people are figuring out exactly what is the risk level when you use a mobile, for instance, versus playing the radio, versus selecting a song, versus answering a problem statement. Like somebody says, have you invoiced, and maybe you have the technology. So this is a very, very big area of research and development, even though we have ADAS-based systems. I'm talking about even further information. So this will evolve, and I think almost every company would be going very deep, and so are we. When it comes to cybersecurity, I think this is still work in progress, because as you mentioned right now, the potential, if we get into public networks and talking to the infrastructure and other vehicles, there's a great chance to trouble things. And I think they will work. I don't know exactly personally the protection they will put in, but I'm sure they'll make independent layers. So there is some kind of modulation so that you cannot destroy the entire system based upon one. But this is definitely number one topic, along with driver attention.
Mr. Dhingra, your concluding remarks on the topic.
So, see, what we all understand, for road safety, the driver plays a very, very important role. Even we have seen best of best high-end cars also, people were losing life because basics were not okay. So what we believe in, driving skill is important. We have to create infrastructure in India wherein the enforcement, which is the government role, has to become very, very important. Sorry, I have not touched that topic today because we have been discussing since morning. Enforcement is one area which can control human behavior. So one is the knowledge, awareness, feeling, insight, feeling, intrinsic motivation. Plus the enforcement in India has to be taken care of. Because of whatever reason, maybe shortage of policemen or political pressure, or people, maybe corruption, that has to be taken care along with the human behavior part, which all the other countries have taken care. So we are trying to speak to government also. We don't have directly in our control, but what my request as a conclusion is, we all use roads some way or the other. First, we have to change ourselves, whatever we can do as a circle of control, and then maybe start blaming government on all, because we are also not correct actually. If we really go back and think, we also violate rules some way or the other. We all, in fact. So first we correct ourselves, we become better citizens, and then we request government to become better government also, maybe a second step. So my request to everyone is, follow rules as much as possible. Don't violate, and take care of your life and safety for everyone on the road. Yes, sir.
Mr. Your final thought.
My point is that I think we're in the last bastion of change, because safety is very intertwined with infrastructure and road engineering and human behavior. And while everything else in India has changed, if you notice, from our cars to white goods to television to phones, the things on the road seem to be the last change required. My view is that we need to take a systems approach. There's quite a well-defined approach to make sure that fatalities reduce. If we don't take that, one way or the other, people will not be able to follow it. Because if you have a highway where nobody can monitor it, and there's a U-turn which is not the right U-turn, but it saves you 2 kilometers, the chances are very high that will not allow you to help people follow the rules. So the system approach, and all have to collaborate. We need to have the regulators, we need to have the OEMs, we need to have the society NGOs, and we have to have the research academia come together. And we haven't, if you see in our today's entire communication, we have very high level data, but we don't have a very actionable data. So there was no data typically around where, whether I'm an OEM, or whether you somebody in society, they say, I'll put my 100 rupees here to develop a new innovation because this will save lives in the Indian circumstance. So there's a lot of data, but it's all over the place. Very good work done by people like Rasi and IIT Madras and all, but it's not all put together. So we are talking quite a bit without database solutions. So we need to get database solution. We have to be system oriented, and then we need to take the larger issues of the transport concept. What transport concept are we prioritizing in cities? What is on the highways? Because this will make a change. Because this is not the end of our journey. In the next, if India is going to become one of the premium economies, the growth in mobility is going to snowball. And what we are facing now is nothing compared to what we'll face tomorrow. So it will even get much more tougher to deal with this issue. So the only way out is that, and we have to come together, and we have to be data driven. Believe me, sometimes when we are driving, the only problem you see is in front of you, and you blame the 4 or 5 people in front of you, but you can't see the full picture. If you go on a high expressway, there'll be pockets of jams. Why? Because there's a mix of traffic with different power to weight ratios. That means there'll be one underpowered vehicle in the front stopping you. So you'll have, if you take a drone and you're flying over the highway, you'll see 10 jams in an absolutely empty long highway. So now if you don't see it from that bird's eye view, you will just complain about the thing in front of you. That shouldn't happen. And at the moment, we don't have enough to speak properly.
So making mobility safe and secure, is not that easy, but we can achieve the target of reducing fatalities by 50%, as the government set within the timeline. But a holistic approach is required. That's what we have been listening to all the experts right from the morning. So it's very nice talking to you, Mr. Dhingra, Mr. Randhawa. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.